Imagine moving into a new home, only to realize that it's alive with things that defy explanation, shadowy figures lurking in the corners, objects moving on their own, and cold spots that seem to have a mind of their own. Ray's family thought they were starting fresh, but the basement grew colder. The balloon floated toward the basement door, and eerie noises filled the house at night. And it didn't stop. There Maggie caught her cat's tail being pulled by an invisible force. What are these terrifying forces, and why are they targeting these families? Stay tuned as we unravel the chilling truth behind these creepy, unexplainable occurrences. The cold, ominous feeling of a house that doesn't feel like home. A place that feels alive with its strange sounds and movements that defy explanation. Ray, a woman who recently moved into a new home with her family, recounts the chilling experiences they've had since settling in. They had hoped to start fresh, but the eerie atmosphere of the house soon made them question their decision. The basement in particular was the source of much of their discomfort. Ray first noticed that the basement was always cold, no matter the weather. It was as though the temperature itself was in constant opposition to the rest of the house. They would turn on the heat, but the basement remained frigid. At night, the chill felt even worse. Sometimes, it was just the cold that unnerved hurt. Was the feeling that something else was down there watching them. The family heard strange noises coming from the basement late at night. The sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. The creaking of old floorboards and faint whispers, like distant conversations that didn't quite belong. One evening, Ray was in the kitchen when she heard what sounded like footsteps coming from the basement. She called out to her husband, but he wasn't home yet. As the noises persisted, she decided to investigate. But as she approached the basement door, a strange unease washed over her. It wasn't just the darkness or the chill in the air, it was the feeling that something was quite right. When Ray's son came to her with a request for a toy, she bought him a large Elmo balloon. At first it seemed harmless, like any other birthday gift. But the balloon began to behave oddly. It would float by itself towards the basement door. Ray thought maybe there was an air current that was making it move. But she couldn't ignore the way it would consistently head toward the basement every time it was let go. It wasn't just a random movement. It seemed deliberate, as if the balloon itself had a mind of its own. Ray's suspicion grew, and she started to wonder if this was just a coincidence, or if something was pulling the balloon toward the basement. One night, after noticing the balloon drifting towards the door again, Ray decided to leave the basement door slightly ajar to see what would happen. To her horror, the balloon seemed to push itself against the door and linger there, as though it was waiting for permission to enter. She quickly shut the door, but the eerie feeling lingered in the air. At this point, Ray's family was unsettled. She began to notice other strange occurrences, the lights flickering in the basement, the sounds of things moving when no one was there, and the growing sense of being watched. The basement had become a place of dread. Ray and her family began to avoid the basement entirely, but the mystery remained. Maggie, another contributor to the video, shared her own experiences with her home. She too had noticed strange things happening in the house. One of the most bizarre incidents occurred when Maggie was filming her cat one evening. The cat was lying on the floor when, out of nowhere, it jumped up in fright. At first, Maggie thought it had just been startled by a noise, but when she watched the footage again, she saw something disturbing. The cat's tail had been pulled by an invisible force. It jerked violently, as if someone had grabbed it and yanked it. Maggie was left with a sense of dread, unsure of how to explain what she had witnessed. The video quickly went viral, with people offering their own theories about what could have caused the bizarre incident. But for Maggie, the incident raised more questions than answers. She knew there had been no one else in the room at the time, and the way her cat reacted didn't fit the usual behavior of an animal. It wasn't just fear, it seemed as if the cat had been physically manipulated by something unseen. Maggie consulted with friends and family, but none of them could offer a reasonable explanation. The video became a source of fascination for viewers online, many of whom believed that what Maggie had captured was proof of something paranormal. Some speculated that it was a ghost. Others believed it was an unseen force manipulating the environment. But despite the viral response, Maggie still had no idea what had caused the strange event. Maggie's experiences didn't stop there. Doors in her home would open and close by themselves, seemingly on their own accord. She would hear knocks on the door when no one was around, and objects would sometimes move when she wasn't looking. It was as though her home had a mind of its own. Maggie wondered if these occurrences were linked to her cat's strange behavior, or if they were part of something much bigger, a supernatural presence that had made itself known in her home. As the months passed, both Ray and Maggie began to connect their strange experiences to something more ominous. Ray, in particular, felt that whatever was haunting her basement was becoming more active. She noticed that the events were happening more frequently and were becoming more intense. The temperature in the house would suddenly drop without explanation, and the sense of being watched became more pronounced. In her mind, the basement was more than just a source of cold and noise. It was the epicenter of something dark and unexplained. The two women's experiences were unsettling, but they were not alone. More people began to come forward, sharing their own stories of strange occurrences in their homes. Some reported hearing footsteps in empty rooms, while others claimed to have seen shadowy figures lurking in the corners of their homes. But the common thread among all these stories was a feeling of dread and unease, as if something unexplainable was at work. Forensic experts, paranormal investigators, and skeptics began to weigh in on these cases, trying to find logical explanations for the strange events. Some believed that the incidents could be attributed to natural causes, drafts in the house, changes in temperature, or even sleep paralysis. Others suggested that the experiences were the result of a mass hysteria, a psychological reaction to stress or fear. But there were some who argued that the cases were proof of something far more sinister, something beyond the realm of ordinary explanation. As the theories continued to swirl, one thing remained clear: the feeling of terror that gripped these homes was real. Whether caused by natural forces or something more otherworldly, the fear that Ray, Maggie, and others experienced was undeniable. And with each new story that surfaced, the mystery deepened. Were these haunting experiences just coincidence? Or was there something more sinister at play? Theories about the paranormal became more complex. Could there be an unknown entity manipulating the environment, pulling the strings behind these unsettling events? Were Ray's son and Maggie's cat somehow sensitive to these forces, reacting in ways that normal people couldn't perceive? The idea that there could be something invisible and malevolent in these homes made the experiences even more terrifying. For some, the truth seemed impossible to pin down. But one question continued to haunt those involved. What was really happening in these homes? Was it a series of coincidences, or was something more sinister lurking just out of sight? Could these strange events have a rational explanation, or were they truly signs of something beyond human understanding? As Ray and Maggie shared their stories with the world, the feeling of terror continued to grow. Whether it was the coldness of the basement, the erratic movements of a balloon, or the invisible force pulling a cat's tail, these unsettling experiences left many wondering: are we alone, or is there something watching us, waiting to make its presence known? The chilling truth about these terrifying experiences might be out there, but until it is fully understood, the fear remains. As the chilling stories from Ray and Maggie continued to unfold, the focus of the investigation shifted toward the possible explanations for these eerie events. Investigators and paranormal experts, increasingly intrigued by the inexplicable occurrences, began to explore every potential theory to unravel the mystery. Could there be an entirely natural explanation for these terrifying phenomena, or were they truly the work of something far more supernatural? One theory that gained traction was the possibility of environmental factors causing the unsettling experiences. Ray's home, with its cold basement and unexplained sounds, seemed to fit the profile of a house with temperature fluctuations linked to old plumbing or faulty insulation. Could the sounds that seemed to echo from below the house be caused by the house settling, pipes expanding, or drafts from the walls? Paranormal investigators pointed out that temperature drops, which Ray had experienced, are often associated with drafts in poorly sealed homes. But as Ray's son's Elmo balloon moved mysteriously toward the basement, many were reluctant to dismiss these events as mere coincidence. Could it be that static electricity or air pressure was influencing the movement of the balloon? Skeptics suggested that there was a possibility that Ray's family had unconsciously created patterns of behavior, anticipating the balloon's movement and leading them to believe it was being guided by an external force. However, The consistency with which the balloon moved toward the basement door run provoked. Multiple times led some to question this theory. Then, there was the more bizarre incident that Maggie experienced her cat's tail being seemingly pulled by an invisible force. This was not just a casual, fleeting moment, but something that was caught on film. The moment went viral as viewers from all over the world debated the authenticity of the footage. While some suggested that the video could have been altered or staged, the detailed analysis of the footage by digital experts and animal behaviorists proved inconclusive. The cat's tail did indeed seem to jerk unnaturally, but without a clear source of the force, there was no way to conclusively say what happened. Some investigators posited that Maggie's cat could have been experiencing some sort of physical reaction, possibly due to a sudden muscle twitch, a reflexive movement, or even an external stimulus from something within the house like an unnoticed thread or wire. While some argued for logical explanations, others explored the idea that there could be an unseen presence, perhaps something paranormal. There were increasing reports of shadow figures seen darting in and out of sight in both Ray and Maggie's homes. Maggie reported hearing footsteps when no one was present, and Ray spoke of a constant sense of being watched, especially when near the basement. In their minds, these were not the actions of a typical home haunted by simple drafty air or the occasional creaky floorboard. One expert specializing in paranormal phenomena suggested that what the women were experiencing could be linked to a psychic imprint, a sort of residual haunting, where the emotional energy of previous inhabitants, or even the family's own subconscious energy, could be imprinting itself on the space. This theory suggested that intense emotions, such as fear or anger, could leave traces that were then perceived by sensitive individuals. Ray had already mentioned feeling watched, while Maggie's cat's tail movement seemed to echo the kind of disturbance paranormal experts associate with emotional energy being stirred. Others proposed that the family's heightened sensitivity to these occurrences could be explained by a natural phenomenon such as sleep paralysis. In instances of sleep paralysis, individuals often feel a sense of presence, sometimes coupled with intense fear and even hallucinations. But the fact that Ray and Maggie both experienced events while fully awake, along with the clear footage of the cat's tail moving unnaturally, seemed to contradict this theory. Another theory was that electromagnetic fields in the home could be influencing the family's experiences. High levels of EMFs are often linked to feelings of anxiety, nausea, and even hallucinations, with studies showing that prolonged exposure can disrupt normal brain function. Experts examined Ray's home for any electrical abnormalities, and although they found minor fluctuations in the home's wiring, there was nothing severe enough to account for the scale of the experiences. Still, the possibility remained that some unseen energy, whether electrical or otherwise, could be responsible for the unsettling feeling in the house. Throughout the investigation, one point continued to linger. The basement itself. Ray's increasing sense of dread whenever she approached the basement door seemed to be a key component of her experience. The coldness, the noises, and the eerie feeling of being watched had intensified. Paranormal researchers suggested that the area could have been built on land with a history of unexplained phenomena, possibly even related to former occupants or the construction process itself. Was it possible that the location of the house itself was contributing to these strange happenings? Could the foundations be on unstable ground, causing vibrations that mimicked footsteps? Could the materials used in the house's construction have been responsible for some of the oddities? The basement became a focal point in the investigation as experts explored everything from the ground beneath the house to the building's history. They learned that the house was built on what had once been an old industrial site. Some experts suggested that the area could have residual energy left over from its previous use, while others thought the land itself could have been disturbed by buried remnants of the past, amplifying the odd occurrences. Despite all the theories, one thing remained constant. Ray and Maggie's fear was very real. The unsettling experiences were undeniable to them. And while many theories attempted to explain what was happening, none provided a clear, definitive answer. The eerie atmosphere that surrounded both homes was not easily explained by science alone, and the idea that something unexplainable could be at play lingered in the minds of those who had witnessed it firsthand. Theories aside, the question remained: what is truly happening in these homes? Are Ray and Maggie simply experiencing a series of coincidental events that are being tied together by fear? Or is there something much darker at work, an unseen force manipulating the environment around them? The fact that there are so many unanswered questions leaves the possibility wide open for further investigation. As we reflect on these terrifying accounts, one thing is clear. Whether caused by natural phenomena or something more sinister, these eerie occurrences have left Ray, Maggie, and many others questioning what they thought they knew about the world around them. The chilling mysteries of unexplained sounds, moving objects, and strange forces tugging at animals and humans alike remain unresolved, leaving those involved to wonder just how deep these eerie events truly go. And as we look at this case, we're left with one final haunting question. What else is out there that we can't explain? And how much of it is hiding just beyond the edges of our perception? Stay tuned for more chilling stories, because the truth may be scarier than we think. Let us know what you think about these creepy cases, and remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. If you enjoyed this terrifying journey into the unknown, don't miss our next video where we explore even more bizarre and frightening encounters. You won't believe what's out there. As the investigation into the strange occurrences at Ray and Maggie's homes continued, the mystery surrounding their unsettling experiences seemed to grow deeper. New footage surfaced, this time from a different family who had reached out after watching the viral video of Maggie's cat's tail being pulled by an invisible force. The new footage showed similar, inexplicable events, an eerie, static shot of a dark hallway where objects appeared to move without anyone touching them. The chilling part of this new footage? A rocking chair in the hallway, which began to rock back and forth on its own, with no visible force to explain the motion. At first, the family thought it was just the wind, but when they looked closer, they realized that the room's windows were closed, and the door leading into the hallway was also shut tight. The rocking chair's movements were slow but deliberate, as if being pushed by an invisible hand. Experts reviewing the footage noted something even stranger. When the camera panned out, you could see faint, shadow-like figures darting in and out of the room. These shadows didn't seem to have any clear source of light, making their movements all the more disturbing. The family, just like Ray and Maggie, started to fear the unknown force that appeared to be controlling the environment around them. Were these figures somehow linked to the same phenomenon that had been tormenting others? Ray and Maggie began to wonder if this was all part of a larger, connected series of paranormal events. Was there a pattern to these occurrences, or were they just isolated incidents happening to random people? A new theory emerged from the experts, one that suggested these experiences could be linked to residual hauntings. In these types of hauntings, energies from past traumatic or emotional events are said to be trapped in a location and replayed over time like a broken record. Could it be that the homes were built on land that had witnessed violent or emotionally charged incidents, and the spirits or energies of those events were now imprinted on the house itself? Some investigators even began to suggest that these experiences were not traditional hauntings at all, but rather something more sinister. Were these events being manipulated by something intelligent, a presence that understood how to use the objects in the house to unsettle and torment the people living there? Could this be the work of a malevolent entity that was actively trying to frighten or manipulate its victims? The idea of intelligent entities controlling the environment was particularly disturbing. What if these entities were not just causing objects to move or creating eerie sounds? What if they were more malevolent, pushing people to the edge of terror, playing on their deepest fears? Could the forces haunting these homes have been manipulating emotions, making people feel paranoia, anxiety, and a sense of helplessness? Could the movement of the balloon towards the basement, the cat's tail being pulled, and the inexplicable noises have been part of a larger, more terrifying design? As the theories about intelligent forces gained momentum, another unsettling incident occurred, this time in Maggie's home. While she was sitting with her family, they noticed the temperature in the living room suddenly plummeting. The room, normally warm and comfortable, turned so cold that they could see their breath in the air. Maggie checked the thermostat, but it was still set to a normal temperature. The family's discomfort escalated as they heard faint whispers, faint voices. Almost like a conversation happening in the background, no one was there. Maggie grabbed her phone to record, but as she filmed, the whispers grew louder, clearer. and then just as suddenly as they had begun, the room returned to its normal temperature. The whispers stopped, and the cold receded. There was no explanation for what had happened, but the footage captured the moment, and it went viral once again. Forensic experts who had been studying the footage and analyzing the anomalies proposed that these auditory hallucinations might not have been supernatural at all, but could instead be the result of electromagnetic interference. Certain electrical devices, they explained, could emit sounds that were not heard by the naked ear, but could be picked up by video equipment. These sounds might be interpreted as whispers or voices. However, this theory didn't explain the extreme drop in temperature or the movement of objects that had been documented. Despite the skeptical explanations, the chilling reality remained that these families were living in fear. The longer Ray, Maggie, and the others lived in these haunted homes, the more they became convinced that they were being targeted by something they couldn't see or understand. The question they kept asking themselves: what is truly haunting them, and why? Each new story, each new piece of footage, only deepened the mystery. Was there an underlying force connecting all of these experiences, or were they simply isolated incidents that coincidentally shared similar characteristics? Could these strange occurrences really be paranormal? Or were they the result of something more psychologically disturbing, like mass hysteria or a shared delusion? Some of the most frightening stories came from families who had lived in these homes for years, only to find that the haunting gradually grew worse over time. The longer they stayed, the more intense the experiences became. It wasn't just the moving objects and strange noises. It was the overwhelming fear and discomfort that grew with each passing day. What began as small, seemingly harmless incidents snowballed into full-blown terror, as families reported seeing figures in their peripheral vision, feeling cold spots, and experiencing the feeling of being touched by unseen hands. As more people came forward with their experiences, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. The incidents weren't just happening in one or two isolated homes, they were occurring in neighborhoods, even entire cities across the country. Could there be a larger explanation behind all of these eerie occurrences? Were these events somehow connected, as though some malevolent force was spreading, haunting one home after another? Or was it just an eerie coincidence that people in different areas were experiencing the same types of phenomena? Theories about mass psychological influence and group hysteria began to surface, but they seemed to fall short in explaining the physical evidence, the movement of objects, recorded whispers, the visible reactions from animals. Were the people experiencing these phenomena just imagining things, or was something real and terrifying at work? One final question loomed over the investigation. Are we truly alone in our homes? Or is there something more sinister lurking in the shadows just beyond our perception? As Ray, Maggie, and others continued to share their experiences, the story unfolded into a wider investigation. Were these homes cursed? Or was there a deeper, more complex explanation that no one had yet uncovered? Could the strange occurrences be linked to ancient rituals, long-forgotten tragedies, or even scientific anomalies that defied conventional understanding? As the investigation continued, more unsettling footage came to light, fueling the growing sense of unease. Several families, after hearing about Ray, Maggie, and others, reached out, eager to share their own eerie experiences. What was once thought to be isolated events now seemed like part of a much larger phenomenon, and these stories were even more disturbing. One particular story came from a family in a quiet suburban neighborhood. For months, they had been experiencing the same unsettling incidents: flickering lights, mysterious knocks on the walls, and the feeling of being watched. But it wasn't until they installed security cameras that they captured something truly terrifying. In the middle of the night, the footage showed the front door creaking open by itself. Though there was no sign of forced entry or a draft, even more unnerving was the figure caught on tape, an indistinct shadow moving across the living room. It seemed to float just above the floor with no legs, and it passed through the doorway before vanishing. The family was left shaken. They didn't know what to make of it. They reached out to paranormal investigators, but none could offer a clear explanation. Some theorized that it could have been an optical illusion caused by the camera's infrared setting. while others suggested it might have been a shadow created by an object moving just out of frame. But the family insisted that there was something otherworldly about the figure. The idea of invisible, shadowy figures began to pop up in other reports. Maggie, after reviewing the footage of her cat's tail being pulled by an unseen force, recalled a similar experience that had been caught in her home. She had been recording a video of her living room, only to capture a fleeting glimpse of something passing by her camera. At first, it was hard to make out, but upon further analysis, experts believed it was the shape of a human form, though too faint to be definitive. Maggie was terrified. Was there something more than just random events happening here? Theories surrounding the idea of shadow figures began to circulate. Some paranormal researchers believe that these shadow entities were not just benign spirits but manifestations of energy from the living. Could these shadowy figures be created by strong emotions, like fear or anger? Or were they truly ghosts of the past, coming back to haunt the living? Investigators delved into the idea that shadow figures were often associated with shadow people, an ominous phenomenon where individuals experience dark humanoid figures lurking in their peripheral vision. But as more families came forward with their own experiences, a disturbing pattern started to form. Many of these shadow figures appeared in homes with a history of emotional turmoil, such as domestic violence, tragic accidents, or unresolved grief. Could these negative energies be the cause of the haunting? Is there something in the environment, something unseen, that was amplifying the terrifying experiences of those who lived in these homes? Another chilling development involved an unusual screeching sound that had been reported by several families. In Ray's home, the noise seemed to emanate from the basement, the place where she had always felt the most uneasy. The sound would often come late at night, sharp and piercing, like a metal object scraping against concrete. Maggie reported similar noises in her own house, although hers sounded more like a constant buzzing, as if a high-pitched electrical frequency was resonating through the walls. Investigators had no immediate explanation for the screeching sounds. Some thought it might be related to faulty electrical wiring, but others pointed to something more ominous: electromagnetic fields. High levels of EMFs are believed to cause physical symptoms like headaches, dizziness, and even hallucinations in extreme cases. Could these strange sounds and feelings be the result of unseen electrical disturbances in the home? Or could they be connected to a paranormal force that was trying to communicate, sending out a frequency that only certain individuals were sensitive to? With more families experiencing similar phenomena, the theory that these events were tied to electromagnetic interference gained traction. Some investigators proposed that these disturbances could be creating an atmosphere that heightened the residents' sense of fear, making them more susceptible to believing in paranormal activity. But others felt that the persistence of these experiences across different homes, different states, and over long periods of time was too significant to ignore. As more evidence was collected, the questions surrounding these experiences continued to multiply. Were these just isolated cases, or was something much larger at work here? Why were certain families experiencing the same kinds of terrifying events in their homes? And what was the connection between the strange noises, shadow figures, and the sense of being watched? As more people shared their stories, the investigation into these creepy, mysterious occurrences became more urgent. Experts, skeptics, and believers alike all weighed in, offering theories and potential explanations. But as the stories grew, so did the complexity of the case. Could there be a scientific explanation that tied all of these phenomena together? Or was there something much darker and harder to explain lurking in the shadows of these homes? The growing body of evidence from multiple families and across various locations pointed to a common thread: fear. The fear these families were experiencing seemed real, and it was not just the events themselves that were unsettling. It was the psychological toll that these incidents were taking on the individuals involved. Could this fear be the result of real paranormal activity, or was it a manifestation of the mind, influenced by the power of suggestion and the need to make sense of the inexplicable? Forensic experts who had studied these occurrences proposed a new theory: psychic imprinting. According to this theory, powerful emotions and traumatic experiences could leave lasting imprints on the environment. This imprinting could be triggered by the emotional energy of those who lived in the house, or by an event that resonated deeply within the space. These imprints, left behind by past events, could then replay over time, causing strange and unexplainable occurrences. This would explain why some houses seemed to attract paranormal activity, while others remained unaffected. But not everyone agreed with the psychic imprinting theory. Skeptics argued that there was no concrete evidence to support the idea that emotional energy could cause physical manifestations. They pointed to environmental factors like temperature fluctuations, structural issues, and electromagnetic interference as more likely culprits. But even they couldn't deny the undeniable reality of what was happening in these homes. What was truly at play here? Could it be the result of natural forces manipulating the environment in ways that no one could fully understand? Or was there something much more sinister happening beneath the surface? The uncertainty left investigators searching for answers, but every new theory seemed to only add more questions. The families who had experienced these strange events were left wondering what the future held. Could the paranormal activity continue to escalate? Would their homes ever feel like safe havens again? And, perhaps most unsettling of all, was the fear they felt just a symptom of something much larger and more dangerous than they could ever imagine? As the investigation into these mysterious occurrences continued, one thing was clear. The line between the natural and the supernatural is far more blurred than we can ever understand. So, as we continue to explore these chilling, unexplained events, one question remains: what is really behind the terror these families are facing, and is it something we are all unknowingly connected to? As investigators continued their pursuit of answers, the phenomenon became increasingly complex. The more they analyzed the data, the more it became apparent that something deeper and more insidious was at play. Forensic experts, paranormal investigators, and even skeptics began to come together, piecing together a theory that tried to explain the persistent, unexplainable occurrences that had plagued Ray, Maggie, and others. One particularly troubling aspect of these mysterious events was the psychological impact it had on the families involved. The more they experienced strange phenomena, the more their lives seemed to spiral. Ray, who had once been calm and rational, admitted to feeling an overwhelming sense of dread, even when nothing seemed to happen. It wasn't just the noises or the mysterious movement of the balloon, it was the persistent feeling of something just beyond her vision watching her. Maggie, too, began to report a shift in her own mental state. She started experiencing sleep disturbances, vivid nightmares, and a deep sense of unease that lingered even during the day. Could it be that these strange events were playing on the family's deepest fears, exacerbating their anxiety and paranoia? Was there a psychological component to the terror they were experiencing, making them more susceptible to interpreting normal occurrences as paranormal? Some experts in paranormal psychology argued that prolonged exposure to these unnerving situations could cause a person to enter a state of heightened suggestibility, leading them to perceive everyday occurrences in a supernatural light. This theory suggested that, over time, the family's own fears were feeding into the paranormal activity, almost as if their anxiety was manifesting the events themselves. However, the increasing number of families coming forward with their own stories seemed to challenge this theory. The consistency of the reports: moving objects, cold spots, shadowy figures, unexplained noises, was too specific to be merely a figment of collective imagination. Could it really be mass hysteria affecting multiple families across different locations? Some investigators believed that the sheer number of cases couldn't be explained away by psychology alone. Something else was happening, and it was something that could not be easily dismissed. Then, in a twist that no one could have predicted, another video surfaced, this time from a different contributor. The footage was raw and unsettling, another example of what appeared to be an invisible presence manipulating the environment. The video, taken by a woman named Linda, showed her sitting in her living room, relaxing with her family. As the camera panned across the room, the television suddenly turned on by itself, with the volume cranked up to full blast. At first, Linda thought it was a malfunction, but when she got up to turn off the TV, the screen flickered and displayed an eerie message that seemed to come from nowhere. "I'm watching." The message, though distorted and seemingly random, left Linda shaken to her core. But what happened next was even more bizarre. The furniture in her living room, seemingly untouched by any outside force, began to shift slightly on its own. The chairs moved, as if being pulled by invisible strings. Linda's family watched in disbelief, unable to explain what was happening. They tried turning off all the lights in the TV, but the strange occurrences continued, lights flickering, objects sliding across the floor until, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. This footage sent shockwaves through the growing community of people experiencing similar disturbances. Was it possible that these events were connected? Or were they separate incidents that just so happened to share eerily similar patterns? Was Linda's experience just another instance of poltergeist-like activity? Or was it part of something even more disturbing? As investigators reviewed Linda's video, they noticed that there was something uniquely chilling about the way the message appeared on the screen. The cryptic phrase "I'm watching" seemed less like a random glitch and more like a direct communication, an acknowledgement that someone, something, was aware of the family's presence. Could this message have been a form of communication from the unseen forces haunting the homes? Was it trying to convey a warning or simply assert its dominance? Now, the notion that these forces might be intelligent, tactively engaging with the people in their homes, began to gain traction. If the entities were not just residual hauntings, but entities with consciousness and intent, what did that mean for those living in these homes? Were they being watched, observed, or even manipulated by a force with its own agenda? Theories about intelligent entities and their potential motives started to take center stage in the investigation. Could these entities be seeking something: attention, energy, or perhaps a deeper connection with the living? And if they were capable of communicating in such ways, could they be influencing the residents, feeding off their fear and anxiety to grow stronger? Another chilling element emerged from interviews with people who had experienced these types of phenomena. Many began to report an overwhelming sense of dread, one that would wash over them even in the absence of direct physical disturbances. The air would feel heavy, thick with tension. It wasn't just the fear of the unknown, it was the distinct sensation of being controlled, as though their every move was being watched by something unseen. This terrifying psychological pressure seemed to be driving people to the edge, making them question their sanity. Some experts who had studied hauntings for years began to consider the possibility of entity manipulation. This theory suggested that these unseen forces were not just random occurrences, but entities with purpose, perhaps trying to break down the mental and emotional barriers of their victims. Could it be that the unseen forces were learning how to interact with their environment in more complex ways? Were they capable of understanding the fears and weaknesses of the people in these homes and using those vulnerabilities to their advantage? As more evidence poured in, the scope of the mystery grew. Each new video and testimony added another layer to the already complex web of questions. Were these cases isolated? Or were they part of something much larger? Widespread occurrence of paranormal activity, stretching across the globe. Could the phenomenon be connected to something? Environmental earthquakes, fault lines, or other natural occurrences that might be stirring the energy in certain locations? Or was it something more deliberate? A force actively seeking out certain individuals to haunt, manipulate, or even consume? Theories ranged from the logical to the fantastical, but one thing was clear. The phenomenon was not going away. For Ray, Maggie, Linda, and countless others, the terrifying experiences were only intensifying. And as the investigation progressed, they were left wondering, what is the true nature of these events? Are they the result of some unseen, malicious force, or are they simply the product of overactive imaginations? As the cases continued to unfold, the deeper questions remained. What were these entities trying to accomplish? Were they simply trying to scare people? Or was there a larger purpose to their actions? The investigation into these terrifying occurrences was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Stay tuned for more developments in this chilling case. You won't believe what the next chapter reveals. The truth behind these terrifying experiences may be more than anyone is prepared to face. As the investigation took new turns, a shocking development occurred that would leave investigators questioning everything. They thought they knew about these unsettling events. A family from a neighboring town who had been following the stories of Ray, Maggie, and Linda reached out with a harrowing story of their own. They had moved into an old house on the outskirts of the city, eager to start fresh, but soon realized that their home came with a dark history. The family began experiencing strange phenomena almost immediately after moving in. It started with small occurrences, doors creaking open on their own, strange flickers of light, and the occasional object moved from one place to another. But it didn't take long before things escalated. One night, the family was awakened by loud banging sounds coming from the walls. When they rushed to investigate, they found nothing unusual. But the sounds continued, becoming more violent and erratic. The family, desperate for answers, contacted a local paranormal investigation team. The team set up cameras around the house, hoping to capture anything unusual. It was until the footage from one particular night was reviewed that something truly bizarre was discovered. In the recording, a shadowy figure was seen standing in the corner of a bedroom. The figure appeared to be hovering just above the floor, its edges blurry and indistinct, making it impossible to make out its features. It moved with eerie precision, as if it was aware of the camera's presence. As the investigators watched the footage, they noted that the figure didn't just stand still, seemed to be interacting with its environment. The bed shifted slightly, as if an invisible weight was pressing down on it. The camera zoomed in, capturing what appeared to be fingers, delicate, translucent fingers reaching out toward the sleeping family members. When the figure retreated, the room returned to normal, but the footage was enough to send a chill down anyone's spine. What was most disturbing about this footage was that the shadowy figure wasn't the only anomaly captured that night. A second shadow, larger and more menacing, seemed to follow the first. It wasn't just a shadow cast by the light, it was a distinct, separate figure, darker and more solid than the first. The family and investigators were left with more questions than answers. Was this figure tied to the house itself? Or was it an entirely different entity? Could these shadow figures be linked to the increasing reports of paranormal activity across the region? The idea that these shadow figures were not just random apparitions, but intelligent entities began to take hold among some of the more experienced investigators. They started to theorize that these figures weren't merely residual hauntings, but active, sentient beings capable of manipulating the environment around them. What did these entities want? Why were they targeting specific homes? And, perhaps most chilling of all, how long had they been lurking unnoticed before their presence was finally detected? As more families came forward with their own stories, the similarities between the experiences became too striking to ignore. In Ray's home, the basement, always cold and filled with unsettling noises, had become the epicenter of her family's fears. In Maggie's home, the invisible force pulling on her cat's tail had intensified into more aggressive interactions with the family's pets. Another woman, Kate, shared that she had begun to hear whispers at night, voices she couldn't place, calling her name from the shadows. The notion that these events were connected across multiple homes seemed to suggest that whatever was happening was just a random string of incidents. The idea of energies or entities following families, whether they were moving from house to house, or more disturbingly, choosing their victims, was gaining traction. Theories ranged from scientific explanations, like electromagnetic interference or gas leaks, to more supernatural possibilities. Some investigators suggested that these events could be linked to environmental factors, such as specific locations over or near underground water sources or fault lines. Others believed that the phenomena were tied to human energy, with particularly sensitive individuals being more likely to experience these disturbances. Could these phenomena be the result of natural occurrences, magnified by emotional energy or external forces? Or was there something darker? A pattern of deliberate hauntings, orchestrated by an unknown entity. The growing number of videos and testimonies led to an increasing body of evidence that seemed to defy all logical explanations. As the cases piled up, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a simple series of haunting events. These families weren't just hearing strange noises or seeing things move. They were experiencing something far more profound and terrifying. The presence in these homes wasn't just lingering it. It was actively interacting with the environment and the people within it. With intelligence, intent, and it seemed an agenda. A team of paranormal investigators specializing in residual energy and poltergeist activity began to focus there. Efforts on uncovering the root of this growing phenomenon. They began by researching the history of the land, the houses, and the people who lived there before. What they uncovered was a series of tragic and unresolved events that had occurred in the homes where these occurrences had taken place. In one case, the land where Ray's home was built had once been the site of a horrific tragedy. Many years ago, a family had lived in the house, but they were mysteriously murdered under strange circumstances. The authorities at the time couldn't make sense of it. There were no clear suspects, no clear explanation for what had happened. Could the energies of the murdered family still be trapped in the house? Were they trying to communicate with the living, or were they seeking revenge for their untimely deaths? In Maggie's case, it was discovered that her house had once been the home of a notorious local figure, man who had been accused of cruelty toward animals. Neighbors reported strange occurrences during his time there, including the sound of animals crying at night. Could the house have absorbed his malicious energy, manifesting these aggressive behaviors years later in the form of an unseen force? The investigation into the house's history suggested that the malevolent energy within the home might have been fed by the man's cruelty and now was being passed on to the current inhabitants. The more researchers uncovered, the more it seemed that these events weren't random. Could these haunted homes be tied to deep-rooted histories, where the unresolved past continuously fed the paranormal activity? Were the entities that these families were encountering the products of unresolved trauma spirits, or energies that had lingered, waiting for an opportunity to make themselves known? As the investigation intensified, investigators began to ask deeper questions. Could there be a pattern to these occurrences, and if so, what was it? Were the entities linked to specific locations, or were they targeting specific types of people? What was the ultimate goal of these paranormal forces? Were they simply trying to communicate, or were they trying to cause fear, chaos, or harm? As each theory was considered and each new incident investigated, it became clear that there was no easy answer. And the more these families spoke out about their experiences, the more people around the world began to ask the same question. What if these mysterious forces weren't just haunting people, they were trying to warn them about something bigger? The investigation is far from over, and as new evidence and stories continue to pour in, it's becoming increasingly clear that the truth behind these creepy cases might be much darker than anyone could have imagined. Stay tuned, because what's coming next will make you question everything you know about the unknown. Don't forget to keep following the story. This investigation is just beginning, or terrifying discoveries are waiting just around the corner. As the investigation reached its breaking point, the puzzle seemed to have more pieces than ever before, but still, the truth remained elusive. With each new revelation, the questions multiplied. Were these strange occurrences simply isolated incidents, or was there a larger, more disturbing pattern at play? Could these supernatural forces be tied to something even darker, something that had yet to be uncovered? The families involved, Ray, Maggie, Linda, and others began to draw connections between their experiences, realizing that they weren't just haunted by random entities. They were living in the midst of a deeply rooted, malevolent force. The energies that seemed to haunt their homes appeared to be far more than spirits. They were intelligent, purposeful, and seemingly tied to the very land they inhabited. Could these entities have been waiting for the right moment to emerge, or had they always been there, lurking just beyond the veil? After months of investigation, the culmination of these terrifying experiences pointed to one chilling conclusion. Some forces, some entities are not just passing through, they are here to stay. And in this case, they weren't just seeking attention or making their presence known for the sake of haunting. They had a much darker, deeper purpose. The idea that these forces could be actively trying to influence the families in ways that went beyond terror was something no one had expected. Whether driven by a thirst for vengeance, or perhaps a desire to feed off human emotions, the question remained. What is the true power of these unseen forces, and what do they want? The chilling reality is that these phenomena, these unexplained movements, sounds, and encounters may be just the beginning. The more Ray, Maggie, and the others share their stories, the more it seems like there's a deeper, more powerful force behind the scenes. One that is intent on influencing not just their homes, but their lives, their emotions, and their very understanding of reality. With each terrifying twist and new revelation, it's becoming increasingly clear that the veil between the living and the supernatural is thinner than we could ever imagine. These hauntings, whether caused by restless spirits, malevolent entities, or something else entirely, are only the tip of the iceberg in the search for answers. What is truly going on in these haunted homes? Is there something we don't know about the world we live in? Something hidden in the shadows waiting to be revealed? And as you continue to dive into these unsettling cases, ask yourself, could there be something even bigger at play here? Could the forces we've been talking about be part of a much broader, darker phenomenon that reaches across not just homes and families, but entire communities, maybe even nations? What if these encounters are more than just hauntings? What if they're warning signs? Warning signs of something far more dangerous. To find out more, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. If this case intrigued you, you won't want to miss our next video. We'll be diving even deeper into more chilling stories of haunted places, mysterious disappearances, and unexplained phenomena. And if you think these cases are creepy, wait until you hear about the latest investigation we've been working on it. It's unlike anything we've covered before. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell, so you'll be the first to know when our next episode drops. Stay tuned, because what's coming next might just change everything you thought you knew about the paranormal.